Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with author and speaker Sheryl Anjanette. She is a warm, wise, inspirational, and motivating person that moves her clients and readers alike. She wrote the best-selling book, The Imposter Lies Within, Silence Your Inner Critic, Tame Your Fear, and Unleash Your Badassery. She has great insights and stories. Enjoy this interview.
Hi, Sheryl. It's Joe Dimino.
Hi, Joe. So nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Nice to meet you. Thanks for taking a minute out today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, you bet. So, before we get into your life and a myriad of things here up front, we've kind of gone through a tumultuous time with COVID and things relating to that. Mm-hmm. How did you do, with your business endeavors and just living in general? How did you do, and how did things change for you?
Oh, it's such a good question. I'll tell you, I do a lot of podcasts, and nobody has asked me that question. It's interesting, Joe. I have been very, very fortunate because, I'm in a very safe kind of place. I'm in a very safe place. I probably went about 20 years as a single mother and was the head of my household. And I think had I been alone, it might have been a lot more difficult. But I'm in a really beautiful marriage. We live in a community where I was able to get out and take a lot of long walks. I was on Clubhouse. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that audio app. So I felt very connected to the outside world and to people in general. And we had the means, to be able to do what we needed to do, buy the food we needed to buy, be able to be okay financially, when things kind of went sideways, because my husband is an architect, and so his business pretty much disappeared overnight. And I actually just am a very positive person. So I took it as I flow through change. I don't resist it. And I've trained myself to do that. And I was just like, okay, this is what it is right now. And I also set my expectations that were different from necessarily what we were hearing from the outside world. There was a lot of, big pendulum swings from this will only be a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, to, gloom and doom. And I just realized I had been in healthcare. I'd worked in healthcare. We were actually preparing for a pandemic. We kind of expected we'd been long overdue for one. And so I probably had a little more information than a lot of people do. Maybe I should say accurate information. And so I pretty much just said, you know what, it's going to be what it's going to be. We're going to be okay. And what we need to do is do our best. And I really just focused on helping others as much as I could, emotionally, mentally, with their journey through the change and the uncertainty.
Yeah, I think the thing that was interesting about going through this time was that it only magnified who we were. So whatever you were before this started was going to get magnified, whether it was positive or negative. It just had to go in a different direction.
I agree. And, the other thing, and I not only work with imposter syndrome, but also with burnout. And I'm actually writing a second book now, but I'll tell you, one of the things that I think happened with COVID is, most people kind of got stopped in their tracks. Some people just had a lot more layered into their workload, and with very different circumstances. But what happened for a lot of people is if they were using work and busyness as avoidism and escapism practices, unknowingly, of course, right, and consciously, but staying really, really busy, really, almost workaholism, then they were forced to kind of look within. A lot of people avoid that deep dive because it's scary, There are a lot of suppressed emotions, memories, things that we don't really want to deal with. There are uncomfortable emotions of shame and blame and guilt that who wants to go back there? And there could be some trauma, unhealed trauma. And so people were just kind of forced to be with themselves. So people either did a lot of healing in that and got to know themselves better, or they used other routes for escapism and avoidism.
True, very true. So let's get to the beginnings of your life and how you got yourself set on this path of motivation and how you live your life. Talk to me about where you were born and raised and kind of how things progressed to get to a point where you're a writer and you do what you do now.
Wow, what a great question. So, I was born on the East Coast, but I was really very young. And so by the time we settled in somewhere, I was probably in in grade school. I was in Northern California. I was raised in kind of an upper middle class, nice middle class and then upper middle class background. My father was a civil engineer. My mother stayed home until we were all out of kindergarten, and then she went back to work, and she worked in accounting and, just kind of had a good job. She was very bright. But my parents were really great people. They really were loving, but my mother was not nurturing. She wasn't, she wasn't a nurturer, but it wasn't because she didn't want to be a nurturer. She didn't know how to be a nurturer. She was never nurtured by her parents, and she had her own set of issues. She was quite overweight and was dealing with a lot of that. And so she just didn't know. So she did the best she could. She was a good mom. She, made sure we had what we needed, the meals, the clothes, what have you. But there was her own dysfunction between my parents, because they really, I think they loved each other, but, mom kept quiet and silent, was a people pleaser, and dad, he was controlling. He wasn't a narcissist. He was like just a huge, loving human being, bigger than life. But, he was used to being head of the household, and he took care of things, and it could be his way or the highway. When he was younger, he kind of got better about that as he got older and wiser. But, and he was just a really loving person. But, it's interesting, as a child, I didn't realize this until I was adult, because my story was, and I'm a very grateful person. I always have. I don't think I learned that. It's just part of my nature, and my parents modeled that. But I just always looked at my life as really ideal. I was so fortunate, because I see what other people go through. And I didn't really understand my own dysfunction and my own, the own set of circumstances that came from my life. So, feelings of abandonment, not because I was abandoned, not because I was actually abandoned, but because in my psyche, I interpreted certain behaviors as being abandoned, you see, or not feeling lovable or loved, not because I wasn't, but because my mom just wasn't a nurturer, and she didn't know how to. She did the best she could. And so there were things that I kind of developed, a lot of people pleasing because it was modeled, a lot of savior behavior because that was also modeled from my father, a lot of superhero behavior. These are some archetypes that I talk about in my book. A lot of superhero behavior, feeling like I had to overcompensate and overdo everything, and just never feeling good enough, and never feeling like I belonged. I always kind of felt like this kind of geeky kid that, was really smart, but I wasn't necessarily popular or cute or, really fit in. And so I just kind of, and by the way, looking back now, because I've reconnected with childhood friends, I really did fit in more than I thought I did. And nobody else saw me that way, but I saw myself that way. And so I realized from my early childhood, I didn't have the trauma or the drama that other people have lived through, but I had my own set of circumstances, and I never honored that, because I always looked at everyone else and thought they had it so much worse than I did, and I should just be grateful. And I didn't realize that it's okay. Everyone has their own story. You don't need to compare your story to someone else's. We all deserve our own healing journey.
Well, so remember this when I ask you my final question, because this is very applicable to that. But before we get into your book, and kind of peeling back those layers. I'm curious, if you right now were in front of a group of, say, third or fourth graders for a career day, and you walk in the room and they see on paper who you are, but one of the kids looks up at you and says, "What do you do?" How would you answer what your job is and what you do on a daily basis?
I am here to remind big people and small people that who they really are, who you really are, so you don't forget. So you don't forget when things happen, that you are good enough, that you are worthy, that you are deserving, that you are lovable, that you are loving, and that you have choice even when you feel like you don't, even when you feel like mommy and daddy or the teachers or the people around you are making all the decisions. That at the end of the day, you really have choice and influence. And you can do anything you set out to do. And by the way, you get to choose your beliefs. Even though mommy and daddy have beliefs and other people are telling you about your beliefs and you're starting to believe certain things, you get to choose your beliefs. And you can change your beliefs. That's what I would tell them. And you get to choose at any time the thoughts that you put in your head. You can change a thought. And you can change your whole experience because of that.
So talk to me about the imposter syndrome. How did this idea come about and come to fruition, and what does it mean?
Well, it's the way it came to fruition for me. You know, it's been around for as long as we've been around, but it was just given a name in the early 1970s. But the way it came into my universe is I was working with manifestation, and I was working with groups and individuals, and really looking at it through with my gap analyst hat on. I was looking at it and I was saying, why is it that some people manifest very easily? They call in what they want very quickly, very seemingly easily, and others really don't. They manifest haphazardly. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, or they call in, the opposite of what they're asking for, what they think they desire, what they're saying they desire, or more of the same. And I looked at this, and I looked at, the misalignment, how things really get out of alignment, and that we're giving mixed messages. And then as I started to look further below the surface, I stumbled across imposter syndrome, and I started to do the deep dive, and I actually was on Clubhouse, and I opened a room. I started a club called the Inside Out Club, opened a room, and started inviting people in just to talk about imposter syndrome and do this deep dive. And I thought to myself, you know what? This is where the cracks in the foundation are. This is where the gaps are. This is where the mixed messages happen. It goes all the way back to our early beliefs, and not even our beliefs themselves, but the experiences we had that form those beliefs, the meaning or the interpretation we had of those experiences that form those beliefs, and that then inform our thoughts and our self-talk. And I thought, this is where the gaps are. And I was really just starting to write a book about manifestation, manifest by design, not by default. And I thought, I need to stop for a moment. I need to go back. We need to fix the foundation, before you build the house. And I did the dive into imposter syndrome, and I'm fairly intuitive, and I was, on a panel, and I've always been a really good writer. It's just a talent I have. It's a gift. I haven't always explored it because it is like having a baby. It's a lot of work, and it can be a little painful, but the result is amazing. But I've always wanted to write a book, and I just declared one day, it just kind of came into me. I said, I'm writing a book on imposter syndrome. I hadn't started to write it, but I said, I'm writing a book on imposter syndrome, and it's called The Imposter Lies Within. The name just came to me because the imposter lies within, and it lies within, and that's really how I came to it.
So, just describing what you do and the services that you offer people, how do you separate who you are and your life and your id and your ego and superego and all these things that make you who you are, but also take on this additional, occupational mentality that is there to help those? How do you separate that so you in turn don't become a part of what you're trying to explain to people with not getting burnt out or not feeling some kind of excessive level of burden? How do you, so to speak, kind of take that yolk out of the raw egg part? How does that work for you?
Well, the way I do it is mindfully, consciously. I don't just expect that I'm naturally going to do that, because that's the trap we fall into. What I do is, first of all, I have some grounding and centering practices. And I make sure I ground myself and I center myself. And I, kind of separate myself from what I'm doing. I think of myself as a guide or a conduit. And I help people through that, but I don't take on their experiences. Everyone is on their own journey. So I let them have their experiences and I have mine. And, I have some spiritual practices. I will cut cords so I don't get too tied into someone else's story, and I just let things go. Now, I've trained myself to do that. I won't say that I always did that, because I am an empath. I do take on other people's emotions and feelings. I feel things deeply, and I've just learned the practices to separate that and realize that I can help people much better if I'm able to separate. And then I allow myself to be on my own journey. And I give myself that same grace and space that I give other people. And so, with my own journey, I realize that I've come a long way. I've done the inner work, but I'm always doing the inner work. And I'm always open, because at times someone will say something or they'll have an experience, and I'll think, what if this is actually meant for me to look a little deeper? Is there something here for me? And I just stay open to it and go with it, because I realize that each time I unlayer something, it's really only helping me.
So I'm curious, every day you wake up and you look at your day and what you're going to do, whether it's writing or helping people, what do you look forward to the most? What's the best part of your professional life that really motivates you and makes you carry on through it?
I'm mostly inspired by the results I see. It's not so much the validation, and of course we all need validation, but it's when I really see that I'm making a difference. And so I'll put a thought in my head of somebody that I've really helped that has gotten a huge aha moment. I'm doing right now a voyage past self-sabotage, and 100%, which is still mind-boggling to me, 100% of the participants are fully engaged and all getting major, major breakthroughs. So what really gets it going for me is knowing that whatever I'm doing makes a difference. And sometimes it feels hard, even the creative stuff, which is fun. I love the creative part of it. But it also feels like work sometimes, like I've got to sit down and do this thing. But then I just connect it to the results. And I remember every time how I feel when I see whatever that creative piece is done. And I check that box and I see the result. I see someone else consuming that and feeling inspired and seeing it move the needle for them in their lives. It's making a difference. I do want to go back to your last question, because there's a part of your last question that was really important. You asked me, how do I keep from becoming burned out? And I'm in the midst of writing a book with the woman who actually wrote the foreword for my book, Barbara Annis. And I'll tell you, I've had to really mindfully put into place practices so I do not become burned out, because I realized that I was starting to work 7 days a week, 10-hour days. And it's interesting for me because my husband's retiring. We're kind of at a place where I don't need to work. I could walk away from this. I'm not doing this for that reason. But I'm so inspired and I'm really driven to do all of this. But I realized that burnout is not the way to do this. And that I need to mindfully practice the same things I'm teaching. And so that's where I have to come back to. On the daily.
Yeah, well, and I'm curious too, your first part of your answer was helping people, and I'd like to know what's been the best fan letter, so to speak, in quotes, best response from a client that you've gotten sticks out to you?
Well, one of the best that I can think of right now was someone who, and I'll tell you that there are a few that come to mind, but these are people that have done a lot of inner work. They've worked with a lot of people. They've reached out and really have been working on themselves. And one of the people who is quite a big figure in her world said to me, "You're the only person I feel like when I speak, you really are listening to me. You're listening deeply to me. Usually I think I sense that people are listening, but they're thinking about what they're going to say, and they're thinking about themselves or how they've helped other people. And you just focus in on me. I feel very heard." So that's the biggest one. That's the biggest one. But I've had so many, people. I have a lot of people that help other people, coaches and healers that come to me. And so I'm just really honored by that. Let me think some others. People are having breakthroughs, Somebody even just yesterday said, "I thought I had worked on this all out, and I didn't realize until I worked with you that maybe the most important piece was still hidden under there." Or, so many have been coming up recently. In fact, it's just a lot of breakthroughs. People are just saying, people, especially with the self-sabotage, somebody who just recently had a great opportunity come up, and his first thought was, "Ooh, I can't do this. I'm not good enough." And then he flipped the switch with something I taught him, and he said, "But I am good enough." And instead of being nervous and worried, I'm going to get excited. I'm going to get curious. And there's an exercise I'd given them about this. And he flipped that switch, and he was very excited. He went into this interview. He knocked it out of the park. They loved him. They wanted him to work with them as a consultant and asked for his proposal. And he said, "I went back to write up my proposal, and the old thought came in, ooh, I better ratchet this down. I'm not worth this. They're not going to say yes to this." And then I flipped the switch, and I thought, oh, yes, I am worth this. I am worth this. In fact, they're going to be so lucky to get me. And so these are huge for people that are experiencing this. Huge. It was life-changing for him. So those are some of them. You asked for one, but there were a few.
No, that's great. That's wonderful. You play a big role in people's lives and helping them out. And, I think all of us need that in our lives. And I'm curious for you, who would you consider a role model or a hero for you?
Oh, so many people. I mean, I'll tell you, two of my biggest heroes are Barack and Michelle Obama for different reasons, even though they're married. It's not them as a couple, although I think they're a beautiful couple, but I just feel that they've given voice in a way that's very digestible for people and very relatable, and they've taken on complex issues, each in their own way, and they've been able to inspire and motivate without fluff, while dealing with, very important, difficult topics. And despite, having the race card against them, and for Michelle, being both a woman and a woman of color, they've been able to maintain their composure. They've been, just held high integrity, and they've been able to reach a lot of people, across party lines, across gender lines. Certainly they've had people that have been critical, and anyone in that position will. But I think they were able to reach so many more people, and they did it each in their own way and together through their own modeling. What they said was congruent with the way they acted. So, I'm not saying they were perfect beings. I'm not saying that we are all, there wasn't some good, obviously some criticism, but I think that's true of all of us. And I think that when we step into leadership roles especially, I just expect people are going to make mistakes, and that's okay, because we all make mistakes. We don't do things perfectly, But I think if we do things and we act with integrity, that piece really comes through. So that they're the first two to come to mind for me.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to be assumptive with this question, but following that up, I'm curious, who would you like to meet that's alive right now on the planet? Who would it be?
Oh, goodness. Well, the two of them for sure, without question. Oprah. I'd like to meet Ariana Huffington. I'd like to meet, oh gosh, there's just so many people, just really people, leaders that have stepped out, that have really spoken up for others, that stand for inclusion, people that are really leading by example.
When you look back on your life and you look at all, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll add the Dalai Lama.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great one. So when you look back on your life, you know, we have quite a journey, and there's a lot of things that happen, and along the way there's accolades and things that we're proud of. What have you done in your life that sometimes you just lean back and think about and it puts a smile on your face, something that you're really proud or happy that happened in your life?
It's interesting because it used to be the first thing that came to mind, and these both have to do with publishing. I was a senior executive with a very large healthcare company, and at the time I joined the company, they had a magazine that went out to a patient population that was underserved, called IG Living, and the magazine at the time was not profitable. In fact, it was losing probably about $500,000 a year, and there was a feeling in the company, not from the CEO, but from, the CFO and people that were watching out for the finances, that we shouldn't put the money towards it. And I was able to turn that around. But what I was most proud of is then I started to explore this, and I thought, we need another type of publication. And I had a vision for a magazine that went out to the providers and the executives at the healthcare organizations, that was really resource rich and content rich. And we published, really authentically, not self-promotional. And so I went to the CEO, and he believed in me, and he said, yes, go for it. And so I went to my editorial team, and I said, can you handle another magazine? And they were great, and they all said, yes, absolutely, Sheryl. What do you have in mind? And I gave them my vision. And so we did this in April of 2009. And by June, or maybe it was July 1st of 2009, the first issue came out. It was 82 pages color, absolutely beautiful. And it was fully funded and profitable. And I was really proud of that. And that magazine is still being published. And both magazines have won numerous awards. They had absolutely amazing covers with the content. And the people in the organization would be on airplanes, and they would see other people going to the same conferences or meetings, and they would see that they'd be flying and they'd have our magazine out. Or we'd ask for a leader, one of the CEOs of an organization, if they would be part of our leadership corner. And their assistant said they walked into the room and our magazine was sitting on their desk. So I was really proud of that. But now I would say my book, and so again, that's why I say they're both publishing examples. Having birthed my book, I'm just very proud of that. It was quite a journey, 9 months. It really did feel like a birth. And, at the end, it felt like a breached baby. I had all the things that you go through with the birth, and now I'm raising a toddler. But it's just a book. I've had people say that, it should be a book that is required reading in schools. I've had people say that, it's going to be a classic and, be talked about for for ages, and I haven't really gotten it out to the world the way it needs to. But I'm proud of it.
So, now that, COVID's kind of eased, it seems like we might be entering kind of a new realm of life here. And I'm curious, what's next for you? You said you're working on a book. I mean, are you extra motivated now as we move forward to do more and more? How's your outlook on everything?
Yes, I'm absolutely motivated. In fact, I have some beautiful things on my plate right now, and I have to be careful I don't take too much on my plate because I think work-life balance is so incredibly important. But I am in the midst of writing a new book, and the book is called Tapped Out, and it's on burnout. We're interviewing some really amazing people. I can't say the names right now because I need to make sure that I have the permission. And I'm co-writing this with Barbara Annis, as I'd mentioned earlier, and she's the foremost thought leader in the world, global thought leader on gender intelligence. In fact, she coined the term, and she's written five best-selling books, one with John Gray, and she's just an exceptional person. She's my mentor, my friend, my colleague, and then we are also putting together a program now. Something that she started, but we've actually expanded now, and we're changing the name to be called Reimagine. And it's really to go out to the corporate world for work-life balance. So those are a couple of things. And then my own company, Anjanette Wellness Academy, as I mentioned, I've launched a program. And again, I don't call it a course, Joe. I call it a voyage because I feel like we need to go somewhere. Real transformation does not happen just from learning and knowing. There's always that gap between knowing and doing, and it's really important for people to get past that gap, to really have that transformation, to make the real change that's meaningful in their lives. And so it's a voyage. It's a voyage past self-sabotage. There will be a part two. It's really full. It's a very full and complete program, and as somebody that's going through it now said, it's almost like a fast track. Like she's just, uncovering, discovering, and just healing and changing her life very rapidly. And someone who really was self-sabotaging but went through burnout as well, just suddenly woke up after one of the excursions. I call them excursions, not lessons. We have excursions, and everything's in the voyage theme, the travel theme. But she said she woke up, and all of a sudden, for the first time in about 4 or 5 years, she felt excited and joyful and happy again.
So let's say you have a dream tonight, and you run into your younger version of yourself, let's say in your 20s, and you can give that younger version one piece of advice based on the wisdom that you've gained over all of these years. What would you tell your younger version? Don't
sell yourself short. You believe in you. Don't believe what other people say that want to bring you down. You are enough. You are good enough. You are worthy. You are deserving. You're going to meet a man that's not for you. Walk away. Walk away. You don't need to marry that man. He's not for you. You deserve more. I did that in my 20s. I married the wrong guy.
Everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your clients, your readers, everybody. But ultimately, you live your life. And this is going back to what you had said before about, when you were younger, the perception of yourself versus others. But this is right now. What's your perception of who you think you are? Who do you think you are?
Well, I think I'm a really kind person. I think I'm nice. And I think the best of people, and I like that about myself. And I think that I'm pretty driven. I'm bright, but I really think I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm really curious. So I think I'm a curious person, and I like to learn. I have a high self-esteem. I feel good about myself. I'm very confident with who I am. I can't say I always felt that way, but I do today. I like who I am. I like who I am. I like the way I show up in the world. And I think that I'm a peacemaker. I'm a natural diplomat. I'm a leader. But I'm also somebody that is introspective and I work on myself. I think that I probably am I have a lot more going on inside internally that people see on the outside. A lot of people just say, you're so gentle, you're so quiet, you're so calming. Is always the feedback I get. And I think now I feel more of that inside too. But before I didn't. I think I was calmer on the outside and kicking like crazy underneath. I think I'm calmer now. I think I flow a lot better. But I'm always mindful of that. I'm always working on it.
So for anybody out there that wants to learn about you, they want to pick up the imposter syndrome, if they anything related to you and your world, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, well, I'm actually pretty easy to find if you know how to spell my name. So it's Sheryl with an S, Sheryl, Anjanette, ANJANETTE. So my website is my name, SherylAnjanette.com. My social media handles are Sheryl Anjanette. I think LinkedIn might have a hyphen in between Sheryl and Anjanette, but Instagram and Twitter and the other social media platforms, and that's really the easiest way. Instagram, I have an imposter syndrome quiz on my bio. There's some other downloads and free things.
Wonderful, Sheryl. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for your time. Good luck with the new book and the new adventures. I appreciate it.
I appreciate the interview so much, Joe.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.